The galaxy's most powerful civilizations sat around a massive table in a council chamber that stretched beyond the reach of the eye. They were the elite species, the ones who had survived countless wars and grown to dominate the stars their ships sliced through space. With effortless grace, their technology was light years ahead of anything humanity had seen, but they all shared one common belief: humans were a young race, just barely stepping into the larger universe. They were too new, too inexperienced to be of any real use beyond their own corner of space. And so when the alien leaders gathered to discuss the fate of the peaceful planet Xeros, no one thought to include humans at all. Their fleets were already in position to invade. Xeros had rich resources that all the advanced species craved, and there was no reason to worry about the planet's defense. After all, none of them were a threat, not to the overwhelming forces of the galactic powers. The discussions had gone on for hours, the representatives of the most influential species trading ideas on how to divvy up the spoils of the conquest, when suddenly a lone human representative stood up from the corner of the room where he had been quietly listening. The council fell silent as all eyes turned toward him. There was no grandeur about him. He was a simple man in a humble suit, nothing like the towering figures of the alien races. His face was calm, his posture confident yet unassuming, but his voice carried a quiet strength that demanded attention. He spoke slowly and deliberately, offering a proposal that was met with immediate disbelief. "I believe we can help," his words echoed through the room. The alien leaders exchanged glances. Many of them scoffed at the suggestion. Their laughter filled the chamber as one by one they dismissed him as naive. How could humans possibly help in a matter so far beyond their understanding? The planet was already lost to them, and yet this human dared to suggest that their forces could do anything to stop it. The human ambassador did not falter. He remained standing, his eyes calm. Even as the laughter continued, he waited for it to die down, and when it finally did, he spoke again with even more conviction. This time he said, "We may be young, but we have something the others do not. We have the ability to think differently, to see beyond the obvious solutions, and that is something you'll need if you truly want to win this war." The silence that followed was palpable. No one knew how to respond. It was almost as if they were waiting for something to prove the human wrong, waiting for the punchline that would justify their earlier ridicule. But it never came. Instead, the human pressed on and proposed a plan for the defense of Xeros, a plan that was based not on overwhelming force, but on strategy and ingenuity. For a moment, no one said anything. They were still in shock, but the human had planted the seed of doubt. The other races began to whisper among themselves, unsure of how to proceed. They had always considered humanity to be insignificant, but now they were being forced to confront the idea that they might be wrong. With a final glance around the room, the human ambassador sat down, knowing that he had made an impact. Even if it was small, he had shown them that humans were not to be dismissed, not so easily, and that perhaps, just perhaps, they had a role to play in this grand galaxy after all. The invasion began with a swift and brutal strike. The invaders had no need for subtlety. Their forces were vast, and their weapons powerful. They descended on Xeros with overwhelming speed, and forced the planet's defenses had barely a chance to react. As the invader ships filled the skies, their energy beams shattered structures and sent the planet's inhabitants into chaos. Below, the alien fleets were an array of races that had long known how to crush opposition through sheer might. Their technology was far beyond anything the humans had ever encountered, but it was their strategy that proved the true weapon. Xeros didn't stand a chance against such a coordinated assault. But humanity had made a promise to help, and help. They did not retreat into the shadows, but prepared for their moment to shine. The human ambassador returned to the council room and stood before the leaders of the galaxy. Once more he spoke clearly. "We have a plan to turn this around." The Galactic Council regarded him with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism, but this time they did not laugh. They had seen the determination in his eyes and wondered if there might be something they had missed. So they listened. The human explained that their first move would be to use unconventional tactics to delay the enemy forces. They knew the invaders would underestimate them, and that would be their advantage. The human strategy was based not on brute force, but on intelligence and adaptability. The other races were hesitant to agree, but with the invasion already in full swing, they had little choice. They reluctantly gave the human forces a small section of their fleet to use for their plan. But no one expected them to succeed. It was a calculated risk for them, but to the humans, it was a challenge, one they were willing to take. And so they began their mission. Their first action was a series of decoy signals sent to the invader fleets. By hacking into their communication networks, human technicians were able to mask the movements of the planet's remaining forces, masking their true positions with false transmissions. The invaders, eager to crush their opponents, split their fleets in response to the fabricated threats, spreading their resources thin. It worked better than anyone had anticipated. While the invaders scrambled to counter the false signals, the humans used their ships, seemingly outdated by galactic standards, to execute precision strikes on key supply lines within the invader fleet. These were not grand battles or spectacular clashes, but precise hits on weak points where the enemy least expected it. Slowly but surely, the humans began to undermine the invaders' operations. As the hours passed, the Council watched in stunned silence from their observation posts. They had expected failure, but instead, the humans had created a level of confusion that spread like wildfire through the enemy forces. It was an unorthodox but effective strategy. Humans were not relying on raw power, but instead on their ability to think outside the box, to adapt quickly to their ever-changing environment, and to exploit the smallest of vulnerabilities. The invaders, initially confident in their superiority, now found themselves second-guessing their tactics in the face of these unpredictable new forces. Soon enough, the other races began to take note of what was happening. They had underestimated humanity's ingenuity, and now they were watching a living testament to what it meant to be human. It was only the beginning. But for the first time, the invaders were not so sure of their victory. The humans had shown them that they could offer something no one else could, not brute force, but something far more dangerous: creativity. The galaxy's most powerful species had always believed in sheer force, but what they hadn't counted on was humanity's ability to adapt quickly and think in ways that the invaders couldn't predict. While the other races were stuck in their routines and strategies, humans saw things differently, and this difference began to turn the tide in ways no one could have imagined. As the days passed, the human forces continued to outwit the invaders with tactics that felt more like a game of chess than a brutal war. The invaders had been expecting all-out conflict, massive battles that would rely on firepower and sheer numbers. But instead, the humans turned the battlefield into a series of calculated moves and misdirections. They didn't need to match the invaders in strength, they needed to outsmart them. One of the first major victories came when a human-led fleet, using minimal firepower, managed to disable an entire squadron of enemy ships by targeting their energy sources. Instead of trying to destroy the ships outright, the humans disabled the propulsion and weapon systems, forcing the invaders to retreat without a single ship being destroyed. It was a technique never before seen in the galaxy, but it worked. The message was clear. The humans had the ability to disrupt the flow of battle without engaging in it the way everyone else did. What followed was a series of devastatingly effective strikes that confused and bewildered the invaders. The human forces seemed to know exactly where to strike, when to pull back, and how to keep their opponents off balance. They used limited resources to create massive distractions, hacking into enemy communication systems to send them on wild goose chases across the planet, while simultaneously coordinating ground operations that were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The humans understood that war wasn't just about fighting on a battlefield. It was about understanding the mind of your enemy and using everything at your disposal to exploit their weaknesses. Human soldiers were trained to be resourceful. They had learned to survive in harsh conditions where every advantage counted, and this knowledge translated perfectly into their efforts to disrupt the invaders' plans. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council, still unsure of whether they could truly trust humanity, watched as the humans began to make progress beyond anything they had hoped for. With every victory, the skepticism began to fade. Though it was clear that some races were still unwilling to admit that the humans had any place in this conflict, yet despite their reluctance to embrace the humans as allies, the galaxy's forces began to rely on their strategies more and more. One of the turning points came when a human unit led a covert operation to destroy an invader command post deep behind enemy lines. Using nothing but outdated equipment and their deep knowledge of the terrain, the humans managed to infiltrate the heart of the invaders' operation and deliver a crushing blow that forced the invaders to reorganize their forces. The human ability to adapt quickly to changing circumstances became their greatest weapon. They didn't fight like the other races. They didn't rely solely on brute strength or advanced technology. They used their creativity, resourcefulness, and ingenuity to gain the upper hand. And as the invaders began to falter, the galaxy's elites had no choice but to admit that they had been wrong about humanity. They had dismissed them as a lesser species, but now it was clear that the human spirit, their intelligence, and their ability to improvise had made them the deciding factor in the war. The humans were no longer just bystanders in the galaxy. They were active players in the fight for survival, and their contribution had changed the course of the battle forever. With each victory humanity gained, the invaders grew increasingly frustrated. Their belief that they would quickly dominate Xeros began to slip away like sand through their fingers. The humans had disrupted their carefully laid plans at every turn, and now the tide of war was shifting in favor of the planet's defenders. It was clear that something extraordinary was happening, but no one could pinpoint exactly what it was about humanity that had given them this edge. On the front lines, human soldiers were taking on increasingly dangerous missions. Their strategy was simple but effective. They had learned how to strike when the enemy least expected it and disappear into the shadows before the invaders could retaliate. Their tactics, though unconventional, had proven to be incredibly effective. The invaders, unable to predict the human style of warfare, found themselves constantly on the defensive. The most impressive maneuver came when a human strike team, using nothing but terrain and simple traps, took down an entire battalion of invader ground forces. The human soldiers had set a series of clever ambushes using the environment to their advantage. They lured the invaders into narrow ravines where they couldn't deploy their superior firepower, and then systematically eliminated them, one by one, without ever being seen. The invaders' superior numbers meant nothing when they couldn't use their advantages to their full potential. The human soldiers understood that war wasn't just about having the best weapons, but knowing when and how to use what you had to your advantage. As this bold tactic unfolded, the Galactic Council began to take notice. Despite their lingering skepticism, even the most critical leaders had to admit that the humans were making a real difference. They watched in awe as the underdog species took down the invaders with nothing more than their resolve, creativity, and knowledge of the terrain. Yet even as they celebrated these early victories, the humans knew the true test was still ahead. Xeros was still on the brink of total collapse, and the full force of the invaders' fleet had yet to arrive. They needed a bold plan to secure their victory once and for all. The human military leadership called together their brightest strategists for an unprecedented operation. The plan was audacious and carried incredible risk, but if it worked, it could change the course of the war forever. The plan was to launch a massive coordinated counteroffensive using their guerrilla tactics to draw the invaders into a trap. Humanity's forces would feign weakness and retreat into the most heavily defended regions of the planet, tricking the invaders into thinking they had broken their spirit, while in the shadows, small human squads would sabotage key infrastructure and set off a chain reaction of explosions that would cripple the invader supply lines. It was a desperate gamble, but if there was one thing humanity had shown, it was that they weren't afraid to take risks. As the plan took shape, the human forces began to execute it with military precision. The once scattered resistance now operating as a united front that struck with deadly efficiency. The invaders, still blinded by their arrogance, took the bait and followed the humans into the heart of their trap. The explosion that followed rocked the planet's surface, sending shockwaves through the enemy ranks and causing mass confusion among the invaders' troops. The human soldiers emerged from the rubble with a renewed sense of purpose. Their creativity and bravery had paid off as the invaders scrambled to regain their footing. The human forces seized the moment and launched a relentless assault. By the time the invaders realized the trap, It was too late. Their once coordinated fleets were in disarray, and the humans had seized the advantage. It was the turning point in the war. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations watched in stunned silence as the once dismissed humans proved they were more than capable of taking on the mightiest of foes, not with overwhelming firepower, but with strategy, resolve, and a relentless will to win. As the smoke cleared from the battlefield, the invaders found themselves in disarray. Their forces were crippled, their leadership shaken, and their morale shattered. The humans had not only outsmarted them, but had dealt a devastating blow to their plans. The trap had worked perfectly, and now the invaders were on the back foot, scrambling to regroup and reorganize their forces. The Galactic Council, watching from their distant command posts, were in stunned silence. The humans had done what no one thought possible. They had taken on an enemy that had seemed invincible, and had not only survived but turned the tide of battle in their favor. Yet even as they celebrated this unexpected victory, there were whispers of doubt. Some of the galaxy's most influential leaders still refused to accept that the humans had earned their place in the war. Some saw them as mere pawns in a larger game and questioned whether the humans were capable of truly finishing what they had started. But in the heat of the moment, the humans could not afford to dwell on doubts. They knew that the invaders would not give up so easily. They had suffered a major defeat, but they were still a formidable foe, and the war was far from over. It was during this critical moment that a betrayal from within the Galactic Council threatened to undermine everything humanity had worked for. One of the council members, a leader of one of the more established alien races, had secretly been in league with the invaders from the start. Seeing humanity's growing influence as a threat to their own power, they had been feeding the invaders intelligence about human strategies and movements, hoping to sabotage the alliance and restore their own dominance. The betrayal was discovered when human intelligence officers intercepted a transmission meant for the invaders. It revealed the full extent of the traitors' plot and exposed their secret alliance with the enemy. The news sent shockwaves through the council as the gravity of the betrayal settled in. At first, the other races were hesitant to believe it. They had trusted the traitor for so long, and the revelation seemed too unbelievable to accept. But as more evidence came to light, they had no choice but to confront the truth. The traitor had worked in the shadows, manipulating events to their advantage, and now humanity had uncovered it all. The Galactic Council acted quickly, removing the traitor from power and ensuring they were brought to justice. But the damage had been done. The betrayal had shaken the trust between the races, and even though the traitor had been exposed, some species began to question whether the Council as a whole could be trusted. But the humans, ever resolute, refused to let the betrayal deter them. They saw this as just another challenge to overcome and wasted no time in using the intelligence they had gained from exposing the traitor to further disrupt the invaders' forces. Human military leaders, now in full command of the situation, launched a series of coordinated strikes, targeting the remaining invader strongholds with surgical precision. The traitor's sabotage had temporarily slowed them down, but the humans quickly regained the initiative, utilizing their knowledge of the enemy's weaknesses to continue their assault. In the heat of the battle, humanity's resolve and unity proved to be their greatest strengths. They fought as one, unyielding in the face of betrayal and adversity, and with each victory they earned the respect of the Galactic Council members who had once doubted them. The invaders, though still formidable, had now lost the initiative, and the humans had gained a powerful foothold in the war. The betrayal had only strengthened their resolve, and with the Galactic Council finally rallying behind them, humanity's place as the key to the galaxy's defense was no longer up for debate. With the invaders' lines fractured and the traitor's influence gone, the humans knew the time had come for their final push. The war had dragged on long enough, and the humans, having gained the trust of the Galactic Council, were now in a position to lead the charge. Humanity's military strategy had proven to be more than a match for the invaders' overwhelming firepower, and now they would make their move to take the fight to the heart of the enemy's operation. Their plan was bold and risky, but the humans had proven time and time again that they were not afraid to take the most dangerous risks if it meant securing victory. This final mission would require everything they had: their most daring pilots and soldiers, their most experienced tacticians, and their finest ships would all be needed to launch a direct assault on the invaders' command fleet. The invasion had started with overwhelming force, but now it would be fought with precision and determination. Humanity's fleet, still numbering only a fraction of the invaders, would strike at the invaders' command ship, a colossal vessel at the center of the enemy's operation. This ship controlled the flow of their entire invasion, and if it fell, the rest of the invaders' forces would crumble. The human fleet, including fighters, bombers, and corvettes, moved into position and prepared for the assault. Their approach would be unorthodox. They didn't charge head-on like the other races might have. They approached from multiple angles, creating confusion and drawing the invaders' attention away from their true target. On the surface of Ceros, a group of elite human soldiers launched a covert mission to infiltrate the invaders' command ship directly. They would disable key systems and provide the distraction needed for the fleet to strike at the heart of the enemy. They knew the risks were high, but they also knew that failure was not an option. As the humans began their assault, the invaders' response was swift and brutal. Their fighters engaged humanity's ships with deadly force, but the humans used every advantage they had learned through months of guerrilla tactics and unconventional warfare. They didn't fight the same way as the invaders. They were unpredictable, and that made all the difference. The battle above Xeros reached a fever pitch. The skies lit up with flashes of energy as ships traded blows and fighters darted through the chaos at breakneck speeds. The humans, working in perfect synchronization, began to make their move. Their fighters dove in and out of enemy lines, confusing their targets and striking with surgical precision. Meanwhile, the elite human team on the invaders' command ship infiltrated their target, slipping past security systems and sabotaging key infrastructure. They planted explosives in strategic locations while taking out high-ranking invader officers as they made their way deeper into the vessel. Each move was calculated, each action was purposeful, and the tension was unbearable. Back in orbit, the human fleet began to execute their most daring maneuver. Yet while most of the invaders' forces were distracted, a small group of human bombers slipped through the chaos and set their sights on the invaders' command vessel with pinpoint accuracy. They launched a barrage of missiles that hit their target with devastating force. The explosion rocked the invaders' ship to its core, throwing the entire fleet into disarray. On board the command ship, the human infiltration team managed to disable the ship's critical systems before triggering their final explosive charge. They had delivered the fatal blow, and now the invaders had no choice but to retreat. The galaxy watched as the invaders' massive command ship began to fall apart. Its control over the invasion lost. The humans had done it. They had crippled the invaders' ability to continue their assault, and in doing so, had turned the tide of the war for good. As the colossal invader command ship began to break apart in the sky above Xeros, the enemy fleet's cohesion unraveled like thread from a severed spool. Scattered and confused, the invaders' ships turned on one another in an attempt to regain control, but it was too late. Their command structure had been shattered, and the sudden loss of their central authority left them exposed to the humans' final strike. Human fighters, bombers, and ground forces surged forward with unprecedented precision, their movements coordinated with the grace of a well-oiled machine. Honed by months of struggle and ingenuity, they no longer had to rely on misdirection or sabotage. The battle had become a matter of eliminating the remaining pockets of invader resistance that had tried to regroup and rally in the wake of their defeat. The human fleet, once a ragtag collection of ships and fighters, was now a force to be reckoned with, and their tactics had evolved over the course of the war into something unrecognizable to the invaders. What had once been perceived as clumsy and inefficient now became a deadly precision strike that left little room for the enemy to recover. On the surface of Ceros, the planet's inhabitants, who had once cowered in fear of the invaders' might, now found themselves emboldened by the humans' victories. They joined the fight, organizing defenses, repairing damaged ships, and rallying behind the humans in a unified front. They had seen what humanity was capable of, and they knew that victory was no longer just a dream, but a very real possibility. The human military, now fully integrated into the broader galactic effort, continued its relentless push against the invaders' remaining forces. Ground troops fought tooth and nail to drag out the invader forces from their last strongholds. And as they did, they left nothing to chance. Humanity's soldiers didn't just push back. They took territory, establishing firm control over the areas they reclaimed. Back in orbit, the remaining invader ships were being systematically destroyed as the humans worked in tandem with the Allied fleets that had finally come around to recognizing their value. The human forces were no longer seen as auxiliaries. They were leading the charge, driving the invaders out of the galaxy with each passing hour. But even as the humans celebrated their success, they knew the invaders had one final card to play: their reinforcements. Thousands of warships, still in the process of arriving, could tip the balance of power back in the invaders' favor. Humanity's forces had been stretched thin, and a new offensive could mean their entire victory would be undone. Yet, the humans weren't shaken by this possibility. They had faced impossible odds before, and every victory had only reinforced their belief in their ability to adapt and succeed. It wasn't just about fighting battles anymore. It was about strategy and endurance. The final human move was to cut off the invaders' reinforcements at the source. Using their now expert understanding of the invaders' communication systems, the humans intercepted transmissions, feeding false information that led the reinforcements directly into a trap. As the invader ships arrived, they found themselves facing a surprise attack from the most unlikely of places: hidden human vessels positioned at critical choke points in deep space. The ambush was a resounding success, and the invaders' reinforcements were swiftly decimated, leaving them with no more ships to deploy to the front lines. Without the resources to continue their war, the invaders were forced to retreat, their morale broken beyond repair. The humans, now proven beyond doubt as the central force behind the galaxy's defense, had won the war. Zeros was free, and the galaxy could finally breathe again. However, as the human forces began their celebration, they also understood that this victory wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The galaxy would need rebuilding, and the humans had demonstrated that they were not only capable of winning wars, they were capable of leading the charge toward a new era of peace and cooperation among the stars. But as the celebrations continued, a quiet realization settled in humanity's leaders. Their influence in the galaxy had grown exponentially, and now they would have to navigate the delicate politics of their newfound power. The victory over the invaders had been hard-earned, but it was undeniable. Humanity's ingenuity, courage, and relentless spirit had turned the tide of war and liberated the galaxy from a seemingly invincible force. Zeros stood free, its skies clear for the first time in years, and the once defeated planet's citizens now looked to the stars with a new sense of hope. Humanity had proven that they could not only survive but thrive in the face of overwhelming odds. Yet as the celebrations carried on, a new reality began to set in. The war had been won, but the galaxy was far from stable. In the aftermath, the true cost of the conflict became apparent. Countless worlds had been ravaged, billions of lives lost, and entire star systems left in ruins. The galaxy now faced the monumental task of rebuilding. For the humans, this wasn't just about winning a war. It was about establishing a future where such destruction would never happen again. The galaxy had changed, and humanity had earned its place not as an outsider, but as a leader in a new, interconnected era. The Galactic Council, now more unified than ever, gathered to discuss the future. The human representatives were seated at the table, no longer as newcomers or second-class citizens, but as full members with the power to shape the future of the galaxy. For the first time, the Council saw humanity not as a potential threat, but as an ally they could depend on. But this newfound respect came with challenges. Humanity was now tasked with navigating the delicate politics of a galaxy that had been ruled by established powers for centuries. Many of the Council members, though respectful of humanity's strength, were cautious of the rapidly expanding influence they had gained. Some saw this new power dynamic as a potential disruption to the balance they had worked so hard to maintain. Others feared the rise of humanity would bring about a new era of conflict. Humanity's leadership knew that their next steps would be just as critical as the battles they had fought. They couldn't afford to repeat the mistakes of the past, where power struggles led to endless wars. They needed to build alliances, create strong diplomatic ties, and ensure that the galaxy remained united. To do so, the humans proposed a new framework for intergalactic cooperation, one that would prioritize peace, shared resources, and mutual protection. They offered a vision for a united galaxy, where every species had a voice, and every planet's future could be determined by consensus, not force. It wasn't an easy sell. Some species resisted, clinging to their old ways of dominance and distrust. But the humans had proven that they could change the course of history, and their resolve to unite the galaxy was unwavering. In the following months, the humans spearheaded a series of peace treaties and trade agreements that began to heal the wounds of the war. They worked tirelessly to rebuild the devastated worlds, offering both technology and manpower to aid in the reconstruction. The human spirit, resilient, compassionate, and driven, became the symbol of hope for all races that had been touched by the invasion. The road to peace was long, but humanity had proven that it was capable of not just fighting wars, but of leading the galaxy toward a brighter, more cooperative future. The Council began to see that the humans, with their ingenuity and determination, had a unique ability to inspire change, not through force, but through unity. And as the years passed, the galaxy slowly transformed. Old grudges began to heal, new alliances were formed, and a shared vision for the future began to take shape. Humanity's place in the stars was no longer in question. They had earned it. They were no longer the underestimated underdogs. They were the architects of a new era. The last remnants of the invaders faded into history, a distant memory of a time when humanity had been underestimated, but never again. The galaxy was safe, and humanity had proven that, when given the chance, they could rise above every challenge and lead the way toward a new dawn.